pension reforms will result in $83 billion in savings to local governments over the next 30 years. Our responsibility is clear. Jointly, this year, we have to get pension reform passed. We can't live with it for another year. We also have proposals on early intervention and pre-K that we're excited about that will ease the burden on families with special needs children. Right now, contracting and administrative responsibilities are overly burdensome for the counties. 40% of the families have insurance coverage. Insurance coverage covers just 3% of the total program funding, believe it or not. As you know, right now the state pays about 60% and the counties pay 40%. But the counties are the ones who have been really administering the program, even though they don't have the ability or limited ability to manage the costs. So the counties have been in a terrible position. They have to pay 40%, they administer, but they're not deciding what services are actually granted. Under this proposal, we want to divide evenly the growth among the state, the county, and the school districts. Why? Because school districts are making decisions on the program. And they're often making the decisions what care is provided. And the school districts are not participating in paying for the program. And it's a very simple rule. If you want to make the decision, then you should actually share the cost. So it will save $150 million for the counties, which is important. But more importantly, the school districts will now have skin in the game. They'll be paying part of the price. I think it's going to change the way they actually administer the program. So in the new budget, there are a lot of provisions that are specifically for local governments that will make a difference. But overall, the best thing we can do is to get this state economy running, to get jobs created in the private sector. If the economy is running, I have a tax base, you have a tax base. If you have a tax base, you can run your own government just fine. And we have several provisions that we believe will keep the economy running. First, the regional councils are working very, very well. The economic development competition, it's exciting communities all across upstate New York. We had a first round. Many of the communities did very well in the first round. I want to have a second round of regional economic development grants. Let's keep the momentum going, another $200 million, because it is about bringing jobs back to this state, and this is the best hope we have. Second of all, the state, we have a convention center in the state. The largest convention center is in downstate. It's in New York City. It's the Jacob Javits Convention Center. It opened in the mid-'80s, and it was the largest convention center in the nation, or proposed to be at one time. But by the time it was opened, it was already obsolete. And other state convention centers have passed us by. The Jacob Javits Center is not big enough to hold one of the really big shows, and we're not competitive. This is an economic magnet for the entire state. When you bring a big show, you bring tourism. New York is the destination state, but if you want to remain the destination state, you're going to have to stay ahead of the competition. I want to build the largest convention center in the nation in New York. I believe we can get it privately funded to the tune of $4 billion, creating jobs and saying, once again, New York State is #1, and if you have a big show, a big tourism attraction, this is the state to do it. Third, I have a proposal for Buffalo, where I want the state to do a challenge grant of $1 billion to Buffalo, for Buffalo to come up with a real economic development plan. I know a lot of the parts of the state are suffering, and a lot of cities, a lot of towns, a lot of counties are saying we need help too. It's true. Buffalo needs more help. Buffalo needs more help. And Buffalo has needed more help for a longer period of time. We are one state, we're one community, we're one family, and Buffalo and Erie and Western New York need our help. Pragmatically, we're also one balance sheet. And when Buffalo does better, we all do better. Because if Buffalo is contributing, then they're not taking out of the pot. We know what works. We know sustained economic development investment works. I believe in Buffalo. I want to turn Buffalo around. I say we have $1 billion. If Buffalo can come up with a plan to really bring back jobs and businesses, we will invest in Buffalo. It's going to be good for the entire state. I want to build an energy highway all across the state. We have tremendous energy supply in upstate New York, but we don't have the transmission capacity to get it to the parts of the state that need it. We can get it privately financed. It'll bring $2 billion of economic activity to the state. And long-term, an energy grid is to today what the highway grid was in the 50s and the 40s and the 60s. We need this transmission capacity in a smart grid for the entire state, and now is the time to do it when we need jobs. I want to invest in infrastructure. We need to do it anyway. We have a frightening position with the condition of our roads and bridges. We can invest in infrastructure today, do the work we've needed to do for a long period of time anyway, and create jobs while we're at it. We would accelerate our capital plan and improve 100 bridges, 2,000 miles of roads, water systems, state parks, flood control projects all across the state. We're working on bringing fiscal discipline to government, and we're starting with our own house. We're starting with state government. Our budget is almost this simple. State operating funds this year will go up 1.9%, under the 2% cap, for those of you who didn't happen to notice. Medicaid will go up 4%. Education will go up 4%. All right? So here's my budget, just so when you're thinking about points of comparison. We go up 2% overall, but aid to localities, which is the single largest part of the budget, 4% for Medicaid, 4% for education, that goes right out to local governments. We're a 2% increase after the 4 and the 4, which means the state agencies, my costs, my agency costs, my personnel costs, have to be at 0. So all my agencies are flat at 0, which, as you know, is really a cut because the lease is going up and the health costs are going up. So to keep it at 0, you're really cutting 4% Medicaid, 4% education, and 2% overall. The 2% state funds. Overall spending for the state will go down for a second year in a row. What they call the all funds budget. When you add in all the money, the federal money, everything we're spending, the state budget is going down below 0. A real cut, not a cut against growth, a cut below 0. So we're doing our part, I believe, on the state side. Number 7, let's focus on reforming public education, and this is going to be one of the biggest battles we have this year. It's going to be, the biggest battles will be the pension reform and public education reform. One of the most interesting lessons that I learned last year, my first year as governor, was in the area of public education. I learned that public education in New York is very big business. And I learned that everyone involved in the business of education has a high-priced lobbyist in town. Superintendents, they have lobbyists. Principals have lobbyists. Teachers have many, many lobbyists, by the way. School boards have lobbyists. Maintenance personnel have lobbyists. Bus drivers have lobbyists. The only group without lobbyists in Albany are the students. And that has to change, and that is going to change this year. So this year I'm going to take a second job. That's my goal. I'm going to be the governor of the state. I'm also going to be the student lobbyist. I'm going to take this second job on a pro bono basis, so I don't have any ethics problems, and I don't give the reporters anything to write about. But I am going to be the de facto student lobbyist in Albany, and we're going to start this year. Because education simply should be about the students' interests and not the business interests. It is almost that simple. We're going to have to change our thinking on public education, from talking about the process to the results, from talking about the system and protecting the system and funding the system, to the individuals who are supposed to be served by the system. We have to stop being focused on the salaries and the pensions of those who work in the system and start focusing on the graduation rates and the test results of the students who are supposed to be served by education. It's not about the bureaucracy and growing the bureaucracy and maintaining the bureaucracy and the funding stream. It's about the student. It's not about the adults. It's about the children. It is that simple. And we have to change our thinking to reflect this. And we have to change our actions to reflect this reality. And we have to start with a real teacher evaluation system. We have to know what's happening in the classroom, and what's working and what's not working, and who's achieving in educating students and who's not achieving. Now, we were supposed to have a teacher evaluation system 2 years ago. We actually passed a law 2 years ago in the state saying we'd have a teacher evaluation system. We actually applied for a federal grant based on our having a teacher evaluation system, what they call the race to the top, and we won $700 million because we were going to put in a teacher evaluation system. 2 years later, nothing's happened. And the federal government calls up and they say they want their $700 million back. Why has nothing happened? Because the bureaucracy doesn't want the evaluation system. That's why. Because the bureaucracy is fighting. Because they want to protect the status quo. And they don't want the evaluation system. Well, how have they gotten away with it? Because they're very, very powerful. That's why. And for 2 years, nothing has happened. So what we're going to say this year is this. If the State Education Department and the unions do not agree by February 16th, 2012, on an evaluation system, then I will submit my own evaluation system as part of the budget to the state legislature, because I'm not waiting anymore. 2 years. And then step 2, once we have the evaluation system, if the local school districts, we will give the local school districts 1 year to then work it out with their local union and agree on an evaluation system. If they have not agreed at the end of the year, they will not be eligible for the 4% increase in state funding that is in this current budget. So it's very simple. I intend to increase aid to education for 4%. If they want the 4% increase, they sit down at the table and they do what they were supposed to do 2 years ago, which is agree on an evaluation system. If they don't agree on the evaluation system, they're not going to get the 4%, period. Because at one point, we have to force government to perform. If there's any area to get aggressive, it is in the area of public education, where it is about the children, and we're going to do that this year.